Cyanus tried keeping the rabbit within his sights, but lost it in the undergrowth. With a sigh, Cyanus stood up and dusted himself off. He then slung his bow over his shoulder and wiped his sweaty brow and brown shaggy hair out of his eyes with his coat sleeve. His copper eyes studied the forest with the pleasure one gets from a proverbial fortress of solitude. He listened to the calls of the forest, closing his eyes to focus. He smiled faintly. Any larger, and that scar that ran from his nose to his ear threatened to open up. Cyanus was known to gently touch the gash as a second habit, and this time he remembered that day with dark thoughts. His grizzled face did not hide the wound, but it made it less pronounced. Cyanus considered the scar as normal as the seasons changing, but every so often his disfigurement would gain the notice of the citizenry. If it was anyone else, lewd comments would be made openly, but the stares and whispers were just as irritating. Cyanus heard the bell toll again, which gently pushed him back out of his thoughts, and with another sigh he made his way back towards the keep, his soft smile fading away. Cyanus saw the darkened outline of his home. He looked behind to see a pale moon just barely showing between the trees of the dense forest. When he got inside, dinner was just being served in the dining room. The smell was irresistible. "Cyanus, is that you?" The familiar cry of his mother sounded. "Yes, it's me." Cyanus heard hard, impatient footsteps as Araniah appeared in the entrance hall with Cyanus. With hands on her hips, she continued, "You're late. Your sister's already arrived, and you weren't here to greet her. Where have you been this whole time?" Araniah said more than asked. "Hunting," Cyanus replied as he took off his coat and strolled past her. Gloria was standing in the doorway to the dining room. She always found Cyanus's impudent demeanor more laughable than disrespectful. Her smile was knowing, yet playful. "Come here, baby brother. I've missed you so." They hugged for a long minute, and when Cyanus quit their embrace, Araniah looked him up and down. "Cyanus, get cleaned up for dinner. You look terrible," Araniah said. "You're too kind, mother," Cyanus said as he went up to the washroom to clean up. He cupped warm water from the basin and threw it onto his face. Whatever drops missed ended up as tiny splotches on the blue and green tiled floor. Cyanus took a hand towel from the rack nearby and lightly patted his face dry. He ran his hands through his hair in an attempt to organize it into a style, though it just sat there draped on his shoulders. He then exited the washroom to join the rest of his family. Cyanus took his time walking down the staircase with thick railings that were decorated in holiday ornaments, a custom when one of the family returns after years abroad. "It took you long enough," Bede said after Cyanus took his seat at the table. Cyanus looked right back and began eating his food in silence. He looked up at his sister as she spoke of her time in Clutos, and saw the portrait behind her. Its dark tones served as a memory of the war it depicted. Cyanus touched his scar again, transfixed on the painting. He picked up his mug to silently toast his father along with everyone else, eyeing him fixedly. Bede, first glimpsing the portrait, smiled at Cyanus and nodded his gratitude. "Cyanus," Araniah said, "you of course remember Dauntlus, yes?" "Hello there, Cyanus. It's good to see you again," Dauntlus said jovially, but with a patronizing tone Cyanus fought hard to ignore. He finished swallowing after taking his sweet time. "It's great to see you too, Dauntlus. You're really the highlight of the evening for me, you are." Cyanus's sarcasm was lost on Dauntlus, but Araniah was not so easy to trick. She sent out one of her patented stern looks at Cyanus. "Well," Dauntlus said, taking in the comment with a smile, "you're quite the gentleman. You'll make a worthy heir to the lordship of Gauntrador." "Hm," Cyanus replied, his smile more forced than friendly. "A barbarian turned noble. Now I've seen everything," Cyanus thought. Searching for ways to exclude himself from the conversation without being rude, Cyanus's gaze eventually found another portrait that he favored above all others. It was a map of Den Leraldus. The imperial city was just east of the center of the map. Surrounding it stood the 8 provinces of the realm. Cluto, Picus, Doseg, Minorion, Sareth, Volmnir, Torogotha, Galtrador. Each had their respective capitals as highlighted on the map. Volmir and Minorion were to the south, Galtrador and Picus to the west, Cluto and Sareth to the north, leaving Doseg and Torgotha to the east. The province of Galtrador was much more fruitful and beautiful than most of the other provinces in the land. The children of Galtrador would play in the tall grass, climb trees, and swim in the copious rivers that ran through it. The parents would have picnics in the specially made parks built by the noble family. Most of the province was littered with large square acres of crops, while cattle grazed within their borders. Galtrador was responsible for feeding half of the kingdom's population. The other half was taken care of by the imperial city and its eastern neighbors. At the heart of such beauty was the second most powerful city in Den Loraldus, Calactius, which was circled in a bolder gold than the other provincial capitals on the map. "So, Dauntless," Bade said as he grabbed a thick doppel leg from the platter on the dining room table and took a huge bite out of it. "Tell me, what news from the other provinces? It's been too long since I've been at court, and I admit being a bit behind on events." "Well, Lord Bade," Dauntless replied, while taking from the spread of delectables strewn throughout the other platters, "the news is far from pleasant, I'm afraid. You see, Santelios has returned." Loria and Arenaya choked on their food as they remembered the famous general. The news broke Cyrannus' train of thought as he looked over at Bade. Cyrannus studied his father for a time before Arenaya spoke up. "But," Arenaya said, "why would he come back? What is he planning?" "Well," Dauntless said, hesitant to continue, "there are rumors that he's going to march on the imperial city once he's taken care of the preparations." Everyone remembered how powerful and influential Santelios was, not to mention the army he took with him when he left. After a moment's pause, Dauntless continued, "And that's not the worst of it. There are also whisperings that he has an army 4 to 5 times stronger than King Danton's." For many minutes nobody said a word. They all preferred to focus on their meal, stewing in their imaginations while taking bites of the hierophany on their plates. Cyrannus spoke first. "But that doesn't make sense," Cyrannus said. "How could he have amassed an army of such size? No army like that exists in all of Den Loraldus." "Quite right," Bade nodded in agreement. "The king's army is supposedly the biggest, but if these rumors are true, Danton will have quite the mess to deal with." Santelios was a hero and a great tactician. I bet the people of the Hilthane Falls opted to surrender when he marched in rather than face the wrath of his skill, Dauntless said. Many nobles never spoke of Santelios after he left the kingdom, and when they did it, it was always in secret. To them there was always an eerie feeling they could not placate or control, a certain inevitable event that they could only anticipate the coming of, and nothing else. The table grew silent as each member took in the gravity of such news. Not wishing to discuss the matter further, everyone chose to refocus their attention onto their meal, which was getting cold. Not a noise was heard, save the soft clinking of silverware and the chewing of foodstuffs. Cyrannus first stared at the Dobble head, which was the centerpiece of the dinner table, its twisted horn being the only thing that hadn't changed. Its ears were now floppy and lifeless, its tongue draped out of the sides of its mouth, and its eyes rolled almost into the back of its head. He turned his attention to Bade again, whose expression remained solemn, and then lastly down at his meal, where he continued to eat the leftover Glathon wing on his plate. End of Chapter 1.